you become part of the crowd. You feel a psychological comfort with that crowd. And so you don't want to leave the cult, so to speak, because the cult is giving you so much that if you stand up and point out that this is all wrong, you're not just going to lose the sort of, the immediacy. You've lost your entire worldview.
Hi everyone. Before we get started, I have to plug a few quick things. First of all, my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, is now available to order. You can read some chapter previews by following the link in the description below. Our sponsors, ExpressVPN, get 35% off 12 months of ExpressVPN and get 25% off podcast hosting with Podium. Finally, if you're watching this on YouTube, please go check out odyssey.com instead. We are hosting all our videos there. If you're a creator, you can move your videos across with one simple click, and you can earn cryptocurrency simply by watching videos and use it to tip your favorite creators like myself. So please check that all out if you want to support the show. Anyway, here's the podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today I am talking with Neil Sanders, the author of Mind Control. So Neil, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me on.
No problem. So, yeah, I asked you on after I was on Richard Willett's podcast, The Glitch in the Code, because we were talking about Cambridge Analytica, and he suggested that I speak to you because you wrote a book focusing on some of their work, but more broadly about the idea of mind control. Now, that's going to sound so wild and out there to people, but why don't you explain what you mean by mind control? Because I don't think it's as crazy as it sounds.
No, I mean, mind control in a very basic sense, it just means basically altering people's thought patterns so that eventually their actions are altered. And like, if you want to go sort of the history of what mind control would be, it broadly forms into sort of like four categories. The first is truth serums, like things like scopolamine, sodium amytal, and sodium pentothal and stuff like that. And the reason that these were used was in sort of wartime interrogation scenarios, because it's useful if we can control the mind of, say, an enemy spy. You can find out their plans and stuff like that. And this was done by the Germans, who were using mescaline, and the English and the Russians and the Americans, and it was pretty sort of broadly tested. And then the flip side to that is trying to make your spy impervious to that type of thing. So basically, if they get caught, they're not going to sort of spill the beans. And again, there was a number of ways that they could do this, either sort of drugging people. There were experiments that were done with like hypnotism, for example, so that they created a sort of a block almost in the mind that people couldn't penetrate. And again, there was degrees to which that was pretty successful. The third would be basically taking that sort of a step further, where basically you're influencing somebody to the point where they will actually do something physical, by which I mean attack somebody, plant a bomb, maybe become a suicide bomber or something like that.
Steal the Capitol.
Yeah, kind of like a sort of Manchurian candidate, really, basically. So like a robotic sort of stooge. And again, there's a number of ways that this might be achieved. Like historically, the documents show that they use sort of like psychotronic weaponry, sort of, radio waves, implants into the brain, sort of very crude sort of stimulation of neurons. So literally creating your muscles to tense. And then numerous other ways, like, as I say, hypnosis and more sort of subtle uses of drugs and things like that. And then the broader sense of mind control is basically the fourth category, which is propaganda, societal control, and advertising. And basically, it's like, well, hang on, isn't that a bit extreme, putting advertising in with propaganda? Well, actually, no, not really, because when advertising was first started by Edward Bernays, who was him and Ivy Lee were basically sort of progenitors of the sort of the school, and they they initially wanted to call it propaganda because that's what it is. Advertising is propaganda. Propaganda is using information to spread an idea and to get people to think in a particular way. And that's exactly what advertising is, or marketing. And the strange thing was that basically in the 20s, when Bernays was trying to sort of promote propaganda like advertising, he got an incredible pushback because basically the association of propaganda was with sort of, you know, German propaganda and wartime propaganda and that type of thing. So they had to change the name of advertising to either advertising or marketing. So they had to market the phrase marketing in order to trick people into falling for propaganda. So essentially that's really why it would be considered mind control. And again, there's three sort of, there's lots of ways, but the three sort of prevalent ways that mind control is used, say in advertising or in the promotion of any sort of brand, and that can be a country, that can be a team, that can be a music, a musical person, or they're trying to sort of build a fan base. There's different ways. The first one and the most powerful one, or one of the most powerful ones, is basically using the mechanisms that would exist in a cult. Right. What does a cult do? A cult tells you exactly how the world is, what's up, what's down, when the spaceship's arriving to take us off to the next dimension. Everything's covered. You know exactly where you are in that cult. You know, you're either number 1, you're number 12, or the Grand High Exalted Spaghetti, or whatever they call themselves. And you're surrounded by like-minded people who are all basically telling you exactly the same thing. So it's incredibly psychologically comforting. And that is basically the mechanism that they'll use in advertising. That basically this product will tell you something about yourself. It will inform other people about you. It will place you in a social hierarchy, and it will surround you with people who like the same types of products. So say if you're driving a Mercedes or something, you can instantly compare yourself to everybody else out there and also other Mercedes drivers. But also basically you're showing off these little talismans, trying to attract like people, because that's what human beings want to do. They want to be safe and secure, surrounded by people who think the same, basically. So that mechanism of being in a cult, all thinking the same, not wanting to stand up and go, I'm not sure that information is correct. And also sort of whipping people up into a crowd, because when you get into a crowd, there's a concept called de-individuation. And basically it's where you alleviate your responsibility, and human beings are incredibly susceptible to wanting to just get rid of the responsibility for choice or for action. And I think, and there's extreme sort of examples of this, like the Milgram experiment, for example. People are probably familiar with this idea where they were electrocuting, or supposedly electrocuting, a person, and because they weren't, it was an actor, but the idea was that basically if the person who was running the experiment said, you keep doing it and I'll take responsibility for it, they will listen to that figure of authority because the responsibility is alleviated to the point where they'll electrocute somebody seemingly to death. And this is sort of even worse when it gets into crowds, because basically you take on you become part of the crowd. You feel a psychological comfort with that crowd. And so you don't want to leave the cult, so to speak, because the cult is giving you so much that if you stand up and point out that this is all wrong, you're not just going to lose the sort of, the immediacy. You've lost your entire worldview, and this is the point that they set up. One of the other ones is to basically, again, like paint the pictures, like paint the picture before you actually sort of are aware of it. And this is a technique that was championed by a chap called Walter Lippmann in the sort of early part of the 20th century. The idea is that basically most people don't actually sort of have an informed view of the world. They get it from a secondary source, like, okay, a book, a film, the news, the media, something like that. They don't have a personal sort of involvement with it. So people can use that, and they can create that narrative. So one of the sort of crudest ways was to, that Cambridge Analytica did, for example, was to give people a very sort of stereotypical view of Islam. and the world of Islam. They're all pedophiles. They'll all rape you. They're all terrorists. They don't respect women, all of this. And worse, they're coming here. They're coming here right now, and they're going to start us. And here's where the final sort of element of advertising mind control would come in. There's a very clever gentleman called Clotaire Rapet, and he says that the best sort of advertising is one where basically you say, I want that. Why? Don't know. And this can be done by associating it with, say, something like a celebrity, or by playing on instinct. And this is the point, like human beings, despite all of our iPhones and four-sprung Dirk technique and chaise longues, right? Okay, we're not actually that bright. We're just like a bag of meat and gas, and we're pretty disgusting, and we're driven by our instincts a lot of the time, and we can be very, very easily manipulated by these instincts. With a celebrity and stuff like that, basically what we've denoted is that these people are basically, they're bright, they're doing well, right, okay, in society. And so it would be stupid of us to ignore them, because we can learn valuable lessons from them. If you take it back to sort of like caveman times or whatever, that bloke's got a cave and he knows how to make fire and he's got 4 women around him. If I can figure out why and how he's done that, I can get a cave and fire and 4 women around me and stuff like that. So that's one way that sort of the appeal to authority, and that can be sort of manipulated through sort of like a nexus of media or something like that, or MPs, or people who basically are in a position where they really should know what they're talking about. And again, because human beings are pretty like lax on taking responsibility for anything, it's a lot easier to just go, oh, so-and-so said so. Oh, well, he knows what he's talking about. I'm sure that's true. And then, but what Clotaire Rapet said was that basically you've got to appeal to the reptilian brain first. You've got to appeal to something like fear, joy, lust, something like that. Something that basically people, it's in the amygdala. It's not something like, so in advertising, the most famous example of this was the Hummer, the sale of the Hummer car, which is a terrible, terrible car, but it sold really, really well because it was marketed as a weapon. It is a weapon. That's what it is. It's it's an ex-military stripped out car, but it was sold as a weapon. Like explicitly, the advertising was telling you that this was a weapon. Why do you want a weapon? Well, so that basically nobody messes with you, so that you're the alpha male, so that basically you're 4 foot above everybody else. Everybody's looking at you. It's a power fantasy thing, right? How do you justify that? Well, it's a defensive weapon, isn't it? It's there to protect my kids. And it's the same thing with all these sort of Chelsea tractors, like big Range Rovers and stuff like that. The justification, you want it because it's a status symbol, right? And because it's going to get you, sex ultimately, right? But the justification of that is that basically, oh, no, I'm being responsible and protecting my family. And so how would Cambridge Analytica do that? Well, again, what they did was they basically, horrifically, they used racism pretty straightforwardly. They used to say the weaponization of the concept of Islam, and they sold that, again, just as straightforward as look out, there's brown people coming in. And that's successful because it plays on people's fears. It plays on people's underlying fears of otherness, of, Islam as a concept, because basically, like, people know just enough about it that basically they'll believe these authority figures who are telling them the bad things about it, but they don't know enough about it to go, hang on, again, that's not actually true. That's not a reasonable representation of what Islam actually is. So the fear is, oh no, brown people. The justification is, yes, but these brown people, they rape and they cover their women up, and they're pedophiles and they're terrorists. That was the justification. And the way that they were able to get that justification out was by basically through a sort of a creation of that narrative, and the retelling and the retelling and the retelling of that narrative through a seemingly disconnected but actually very, very connected nexus of media. And that would be people like Rebel Media, which is owned by Robert Mercer, who was the financier of Cambridge Analytica, along with Steve Bannon. And this is things like Rebel Media and Breitbart, and Tommy Loren, Lawrence Southern, and Laura Loomer, and Tommy Robinson, and Gatestone Media as well. That was utilized, and Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin, and UKIP essentially were also part of this. It's to spread this again, this collective idea. And what Cambridge Analytica did was they created a series of provably false stories that a lot of people will have heard of, and they were essentially to demonize either the EU or to demonize Islam in America. Like, for example, in America, Gatestone Media were promoting films that basically showed that Germany and France had already fallen to Sharia law, and they were promoting stories like Sweden was the rape capital of the world, and that Germany was allowing child marriages. And none of these were true, and all of these were created, but these were picked up by a lot of people and sort of were bandied around. And the clever thing about the way that they promoted it, because they were promoting it through these media nodes and such like that, was that if you, particularly in America, if you were to stand up and say this isn't true, well, then all of a sudden, again, you're going against that group. You're being un-American essentially, and so that was a very dangerous aspect of it, where essentially they were codifying it to the point where xenophobia and racism was being tied in with patriotism, and in a very similar way they did this. It was true in England. Basically, UKIP had that incredibly racist picture of the Syrian refugees coming in, and again we're promoting similar stories. They were also promoting ideas that basically
the Breaking Point poster, you mean, right?
Sorry?
The Breaking Point poster, the one that...
Exactly right, yes. And they were also promoting the idea that Turkey was going to join the EU and stuff like that. And there was nonsense stuff that was put around that, again, still people to this day actually believe. The idea that basically Europe was under Napoleonic law, which means that basically you're guilty until proven innocent, whereas basically we're under... I forget what type of... It's nonsense. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. But there's still people to this day that actually believe that. And again, and a lot of this was also sort of promoted by groups like Turning Point, Turning Point UK and Turning Point USA, which is Candice Owens and Charlie Kirk and people like that, as well as people like Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck and Laura Ingraham. And the horrible thing about all of this is that basically the reason that this was all promoted through was to institute policy change. It's all to do with American think tanks that are connected to the industry of say, oil industry mainly. It's people like the Heritage Foundation. The point that Cambridge Analytica, as people probably know, was used in two prominent recent campaigns. It was also used to get Modi in and Orban and
I didn't know they worked with Orban. That's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I pause you for a minute, because there's something I want to ask here, and I feel like you've reached a point where it's a good place to ask this, and we might get past it, and then I'll forget to come back to it, because I think it's a good point to make. So, one of the things I'm trying to work out, speaking to you and lots of people, and when I was writing my book, was how susceptible are people to even just the kinds of micro-targeted dark ads that Cambridge Analytica, definitely not Cambridge Analytica, Aggregate IQ, who were funded entirely by projects through Robert Mercer, and Cambridge Analytica own all of their intellectual property. So it's not the same company, totally not.
They shared a phone number at one point.
Yeah. No, I think it was SCL Canada was the phone number for Zach Massingham, who was the head of Aggregate IQ.
Yeah, that's it. And SCL basically, SCL basically gets up Cambridge Analytica's whole intranet system as well. So yeah, it's the same company. It's not the same company. It just happens to do exactly the same thing and have exactly the same people behind it.
Work on a lot of the same projects and use a lot of the same proprietary. Anyway, we're getting away from this. So my point, essentially, the question I want to ask is that, so I've watched a lot of the stuff that and done research into a lot of the stuff you're mentioning here. The threat of Turkey joining the EU, that like 76 million Muslims from Turkey were going to land on the south coast of England the day after the Brexit vote, unless we voted to leave. It was ridiculous the level to which it went. It got sort of riled up, and it's just outright lies as well, which people seem reluctant to call a lie. Like, that is a lie. Turkey have fulfilled one of the 33 chapters of membership that you require to get into the European Union. They are so far from it. It's not even.
Yeah, it was laughable, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but then on the other side of things, a lot of the stuff I've looked at and is really compelling to me is the idea that the Brexit vote was, for a lot of people, like a fuck you. Yeah, a fuck you to the establishment. The people, it was crying out from people who had been forgotten for 40 years, who have been their lives have just been degraded. Anyway, degraded. Yeah, I was right. Okay. Degraded by years and years and years of globalization and neoliberalism. And that this is the reason for the Brexit vote. And I find both arguments compelling. So how susceptible do you think people are to this kind of advertising, and how much of this is like pushing it over the edge? How much of it is like the basis of this? Like, where do you lie on that kind of spectrum?
Well, I mean, the susceptibility is shown by the fact that basically almost every single reason to leave the EU that I've heard, right? All this encroaching globalism, blah, 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 blah. 2 points. One, it actually came from some of the most elite people on the planet. Okay, it came from Coke Industries. It came from Renaissance Technologies. It came from Palantir, right? Okay. And two, none of it was true. Absolutely none of it was true. All this idea that basically we were giving so much money to the EU and that we'd be better off out of it and stuff, like literally every single point that leave.eu and vote leave put forward as a good reason to leave the EU didn't exist. There wasn't a good reason to leave the EU. There was a good reason to look at the EU as a bit of a gravy train and a bit ineffective in some places, as all massive institutions are. But none of the reasons that were put forward, and this was the point, it was put forward as stick it in the eye of the elites, stick it in the eye. And here's the crazy thing, like, Cambridge Analytica, as you probably know, SCL's got a license, a List X clearance, right? Okay, it means that basically it's allowed to hold like top secret documents for the British government. It's under export control and is considered weapons grade communication tactics. Essentially, it has to be signed off by somebody, right? Okay, which means if Cambridge Analytica was used for Brexit, I'm sure I've read your very, very good article on it, your very good chapter as well. So you're aware of the sort of the connection to sort of like Lord Ivan Mountbatten, Privy Council, large swathes of like Marconi defence. This is the establishment. This is British psychological defence and stuff like that. So here's the thing. When the establishment is telling you that Donald Trump, right, and leaving the EU is sticking it to the establishment, it's a lie, okay? Because it's the establishment that's telling you to actually do that. So that's how susceptible people are. And that's the very, very, very cruel thing. Brexit, in very, very simplistic terms, the whole point of Brexit was to privatise the NHS. That's simply it. It was driven by the Institute for Economic Affairs and the Institute for Free Trade and the ERG. And these are basically offshoots of the Heritage Foundation and the Council for National Policy. And Steve Bannon and Robert Mercer and Kellyanne Conway, they're all members of this, as are the Koch brothers. And this
one of them died.
Yes, one of them did die. This was the point. Basically, they've been trying through the Adam Smith Institute, which is another think tank offshoot, and the IEA, they've been trying to privatise the NHS since 1981. Since 1981, every single other British industry was privatised as part of Reaganomics, which is basically the Heritage Foundation's mandate for leadership policy drive. And that was essentially what they were trying to finish. There was zero benefit to the UK at all for leaving the EU. What it was doing was leaving us basically over a barrel so that we could have this trade deal with America. Then basically what happened was COVID happened, and Donald Trump was just going far too hard with his base. So basically he was just being to the point where he lost the suburbs, he'd lost the women's vote, and no amount of Cambridge Analytica is going to get him re-elected. They've gone even further. I strongly think that Cambridge Analytica was involved with QAnon, or not Cambridge Analytica because they'd split up, but essentially it's the same thing. QAnon could be seen as the thin end of the wedge. Donald Trump is the thin end of the wedge of QAnon, basically. It was the idea of it is to draw people into politics that aren't interested in politics. Basically, again, just to create this narrative of good guys, bad guys, and fighting against the establishment. It's nonsense. Heritage Foundation receives funding from the CIA, right? From the CIA. Cambridge Analytica and SCL have got very, very dodgy ties to MI5 and MI6. It looks like they're essentially used for sort of, foreign policy espionage and rigging elections all over the world. To suggest that these moves were in any way anti-establishment was the most genius of all of their sort of ploys, basically, because that was the thing. You're the resistance, fight back. And actually, who benefited from it? The Heritage Foundation. The reason that basically, they slightly changed tactics right at the end, because basically once COVID had happened, they realized that, well, the NHS is going to be ground into the dirt anyway, so we're going to have to, unfortunately, once this is all done, bring in some American friends, just to pick up the slack. Nothing nefarious.
No, of course not.
So they'll get their trade deal anyway. So they didn't need that trade deal. But that was essentially the whole point. And as this was the point, it was just to get Donald Trump in. Donald Trump wasn't ever the candidate. It was Ted Cruz. And
I think people miss that. I think people because correct me if I'm wrong. Ted Cruz was the one that Cambridge Analytica originally did work for. They were originally they were running ads for his campaign, and then he let them go. Essentially, I think he paid them like $100,000 or something like that, and then he decided to not go with them, as far as I was aware.
I'd heard different, or I'd deciphered different, in as much as basically what happened was, and this was revealed by WikiLeaks, when Donald Trump came out and said, I'm going to be candidate for president, okay, the rumor is, and it's strongly substantiated, was that he never expected or wanted to win. He wanted to lose, and he wanted to lose so that he could go, well, now I'm setting up Trump television, and this is where basically you're going to get the truth, because my losing the election is indicative that you can't have a fair election in America.
I heard actually that he initially decided to hold that first press conference because he felt that he wasn't getting enough money from MSNBC or whoever runs The Apprentice. And he'd literally set up the first press conference and one rally in order to show them how popular he was and then get more money on The Apprentice.
Yeah, and or set up his own one. But what happened was, basically, Donald Trump's quite charismatic. He's a television star. He's he actually uses WWE stuff. Never apologize. He learned this from Roy Cohn, actually. Never apologize, always attack. Never explain, never apologize, always attack. And that appeals to people, because that's actually Richard Willett that told me this. He says, Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's what he used to do. The anti-hero that is seemingly just like that. You let him get away with being a bit of a bad boy, cutting corners because he's sticking it to Vince McMahon. And that's a really good sort of metaphor for an analogy. I forget which it is, because he still works for the man. Yeah, yeah, precisely. So anyway. Robert Mercer and Steve Bannon noticed this apparently came out in the WikiLeaks. The Clinton campaign illegally bought a load of advertisements in swing states for Donald Trump, and they promoted Donald Trump as the candidate because Clinton thought that he's a joke, he's a clown, we can beat him. Like he's not a serious politician. Nobody seriously will go for him. And this backfired because it created a huge swathe of publicity. Mercer and Bannon were quite savvy to this. You've got to remember at the time as well, Bannon was behind people like sort of like Milo Yiannopoulos and the promotion of other sort of hideous characters in that sort of like alt-right sphere. And the whole point is make people angry. Make people angry, provoke a response, own the libs, own the libs. Why? Because, right, low clap for you. But that's the point. And where did they learn this? They learned this from Gamergate, essentially. And from online things. Milo Yiannopoulos, before he was picked up by Steve Bannon and paid a huge amount of money, was actually against Gamergate, and he was basically he was working for the Catholic Herald and writing articles saying that everybody should have to sign in online to stop online bullying, and then realized that wasn't making him the money, and so he became one of the sort of hardest people to go after Zoe Quinn and to try and dox her when Gamergate, which was a whole pathetic thing where like basically this lad lost a girl to someone like probably more handsome than him, and turned it into this vendetta about the honesty of the gaming media, which it wasn't. But this is the point. It's that, again, that all in it together, all in a group. Don't put your hand up and say, hang on, this is just because you lost your girlfriend. No. We've got a cause, we've got a point, and that's what they gave to you. They gave you these narratives that basically you could follow, that you could be a hero by uncovering this. And so incredibly susceptible is basically the point. I mean, this is one of the strange things that basically like Tories and the right wing have always appealed to that swathe of the population that they grind on the most, like the working class. The working class has never been represented well by the right wing in America or in the UK, and yet for some reason they tend to vote for them. And again, it's because they play on their fears of immigration, basically. Like, this is a very, very powerful thing. The concept of white supremacy, right? Okay, the idea that you are superior simply by existing is incredibly hypnotic and appealing, particularly if you've got nothing. And again, it's these types of things. So to oversimplify, it's very, very rich people telling two groups of poor people, that person's stealing from you. That's it. That's really how it works. But basically, this was the point with Cambridge Analytica. They played on all of these things. They did the instinctual thing, where basically, like, I don't like brown people, but it's justified because you've got this nexus of media telling you that basically, well, they are actually to be feared. That nexus of media is the creation of that narrative, the painting of pictures before you even got there. And further to that, you've got the group thing. Come on, we're all in this. Trump 2020, own the libs, blah, blah, blah. We're the deplorables, etc., etc. All of that. It gives people a sense of security, gives people a sense of purpose, and it gives people... it makes people feel strong and powerful. And the most extreme example of that, the sort of like the most extreme example of that was QAnon, where basically all of those people, they stormed the Capitol to overturn the vote. Not one of those people thought they were a bad person. All of those people thought they were patriots. All of those people thought that they were doing a good thing, and they weren't. But they had the rug pulled out from them. And that is essentially the mechanism of Cambridge Analytica. We'll do this and we'll do this and we'll do this to mobilize you into action. And then once we've got what we want, we'll sod you off. And like, for example, in the UK, we were told specifically it's going to save the fishing industry. It's destroyed the fishing industry, Brexit, literally destroyed it. And it was going to save the NHS because we'd get that 350 million quid back a week. Oh, that wasn't true, was it?
No.
None of it was true.
No.
So for that...
Yeah, right.
But
okay.
That's the justification, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you're one of the few people that's really that really hones in on that idea that the NHS is that like the point of Brexit for the establishment was more privatization. Like, so few people seem to agree with me on that. So it's nice to hear some good confirmation bias. Um, but one of the things you kind of mentioned there is something I really, really want to ask you about was, so first of all, I'm not convinced that white supremacy as such is the reason for the sort of success of the kind of anti-immigrant rhetoric. I think it's more a fear of the other, because the right wing of America are actually very good at amalgamating people from lots of different backgrounds. So more so in the last few years, and just taking them like sort of gay people who would have, like, you would just assume are on the left, when the right have like a gay person or I don't know, anyone of minority background.
You're talking about, why are you an populist and you're talking about Candace Owens?
No, Owens. It's more the person that really interests me. The two that really interest me on that are Douglas Murray and Peter Thiel.
Peter Thiel's CIA, isn't he? Did his Palantir through In-Q-Tel.
Peter Thiel is super interesting. I'm really not sure what I think of him, because I've seen one or two interviews with him that are stunning. He is an intelligent, well-read, and seems like a guy who genuinely cares about the future of humanity in a way that not many people come across. So I'm not sure how I feel about Peter Thiel yet. But the thing I want to ask you about is that it seems to me sometimes when I look at this sort of thing is that the use of Cambridge Analytica and whatnot to stir up the right and to play to those like others, the people are coming to get your jobs, your money, your women, your country, that sort of idea is for me often focused on, but I feel it's only one half of it, because the other half is like, people stirring up the craziest and maddest things on the left. And sometimes I feel that we're all just sort of not pawns, but we are just being played against each other for the benefit of the very, very wealthiest. And that all of this is just in order to keep us fighting and distracted, rather than saying, hey, hang on, you're worth billions and I'm fighting with the guy that's worth like 10 grand less than me, because I think that, it's how much do you think that's actually going on in terms of like an orchestrated culture war?
Completely. Now it's about origins. Now, just to explain what I did when I said white supremacy, I agree with you. I don't think it's all white supremacy, obviously, but there's an undercurrent, and you've got like genuinely white supremacists, the Mercers, for example, the Regnerys, for example. The Mercers basically like have been yearning for like a segregated America. And they're not even shy about it. That's why he had to quit Renaissance Technologies, because he kept saying massively racist things to all his employees. Really? He also owns the largest collection of machine guns on the planet, apparently. So he's a bit of a strange guy. Okay. Steve Bannon is a proud racist. William Regnery. Donald Trump's father was in the KKK. And they were taken to court numerous times for basically not allowing black people to rent their apartments. And he was like hugely sort of like prejudiced against Central Park 5. The Regnerys as well, basically, this is where the concept of America First came from. The William Regnery III is behind the National Policy Institute, and he finances Richard Spencer, the Hail Trump guy who coined the phrase, right? Yeah. And he was also behind he publishes a couple of books that are written by Trump. His grandfather started the original America First, which is where they got America First from. It was a pro-Nazi thing, like a genuine pro-Nazi. He was connected to, I can't remember his name now, the leader of the American Nazi Party, but also basically through the Heritage Foundation and the John Birch Society, which is again connected to the start of the Heritage Foundation. You got people like Paul Weyrich and Laszlo Pastor and stuff like that, and people who are connected to the World Anti-Communist League. Like, these are proper, genuine Nazis, and I don't mean that in a sort of everybody that doesn't like rap music is a Nazi. I mean basically, running death squads in South America, Aryan like Brotherhood type Nazis. So there is definitely an undercurrent of white supremacy. But I don't want to think for a second that I'm saying anybody that voted for Brexit, that was the driving force. That was essentially that it was behind a lot of the propaganda. And you're right, they set it up in such a way that basically they justified it. They justified it and they made people scared of things. It just happened that a lot of these things weren't really true. Now, the reason that basically it seems like this is because, like, I'm not sure if you can swear.
Go for it.
Oh, right.
Free speech.
Steve Bannon, flood the zone with shit. That's the whole point. The concept of this culture war that's going on, it doesn't exist. It's nonsense, right? Okay. It was created by Steve Bannon. And it's a bullshit argument. This concept that basically, cancel culture. Oh, right. Sorry. What? Like the time that they told that American footballer that he couldn't work anymore, when the left told that oh, no, sorry, not Colin Kaepernick. We're not talking about him, are we? Oh, we're talking about the time where they wanted to shut down that play because it had Trump as Julius Caesar. Oh, no, that wasn't the left, was it? No, that wasn't the left. I saw that was the right, was it? Was it the time that when the left lost their fucking heads because Doctor Who was played by a woman? Oh, no, that wasn't the left, was it? That was those whingy, whining snowflakes on the right, okay? And what they're doing is they're telling you there's a culture war, allowing a woman to look at it being jammed down our throat. Women and blacks and gays, and it's nonsense. Tell me a single, other than a comedy and a crime drama, tell me a single program on American TV or English TV where a black family is the main characters. Difficult, isn't it? Because they don't really exist. I'm sure they don't watch a lot.
I don't watch a lot of TV sitcoms, that kind of thing.
Trust me, there's not a lot out there, right? Okay, so this idea that basically, it's being rammed down our throat and stuff like that. The concept of the culture war is nonsense. Are there elements of shrieking idiots on the left? Yeah, right. Am I opposed to that? Yeah, absolutely. This is like, some twat gave everybody a voice on social media, right? Okay, and everybody thinks they're basically entitled to actually have an opinion and that their opinion matters, and it doesn't. And so you get people basically who want to have their two penneth and want to say, and the problem is that, like, a lot of people are thick as shit, and so basically they are easy manipulated, and they just want to be involved with these types of things. Like, so this is a bit of a thing. And the best example of this, right, folks, is C16. The one thing that created Jordan Peterson's career, right? Okay. He exists because of the tyrannical C16 bill, where basically it was going to be illegal to accidentally misgender somebody, and you could be thrown in prison for that. Do you know what was the flaw in his argument? It wasn't true. None of it was true. Not a single bit of it was true. C16 basically said we're adding transgender to forms. So if somebody wants to, on a form applying for university, say I'm trans rather than male or female, they can put that. That's it. That's literally all it was. And so all these this is the point. There's an idea that all these people are being cancelled, and that basically the left is incredibly shrill and twatty and stuff like that. And are there examples of it? Of course there are. There's always been. Right, okay. But a lot of it is hyped up. And a lot of the time when people, for example, are like, no, I was cancelled from Twitter. What did you say? Oh, just some free speech stuff. What did you say? I used a racial epithet. Right. Well, there you go then. Like, so why is it when basically like people are arguing for free speech, 9 times out of 10, it's for the free speech right to insult somebody?
I mean, there's a couple of things I want to say on what you mentioned there. I think that what has happened with the people being censored, cancelled, banned off things like Twitter and YouTube and stuff is that initially it was people saying really stupid, dumb shit. And it's got to this point where it's like the boy that cried wolf, where when there's people being censored for things that like are genuinely concerning that they're being removed for, it's kind of ignored now because we've got to that shrieking, oh look, I'm being cancelled. Do you know what I mean? I think because there is like concerning censorship on places like Twitter and YouTube and whatnot now, things that make no sense. And I feel like we don't actually see them as an issue, and because we've heard, oh, I'm being cancelled so much that it's
you did right. It's been cheapened, certainly, and there are examples where people have been thrown off platforms and stuff like that completely. For example, do you know about the £252 million contract that Liz Truss signed for an investment firm to provide PPE for the doctors and nurses that didn't work?
Do not. I mean,
no, you don't.
There's so much corruption right now. It is overwhelming.
But this is the point. That's being censored, and I think you're right. Like to an extent, everyone's looking at it like, "Oh, I'm not allowed to say this," and blah blah blah. You're missing the point. There is genuine rubbish out there that's being stopped. A lot of this sort of free speech stuff comes from. It's a way to get people riled up. It's what's called fourth generational warfare. What you do is you make people feel like they're being oppressed. I'll say something outrageous, absolutely outrageous, right? Okay. And then I'll get kicked off Twitter, right? And I'll start to tell everybody else, see what happened to me? That could happen to you. Now, the point of fourth generation warfare, right, okay, is you provoke, not to change the rules, but to get the system to react in such a way that everybody else goes, I'm sick of the system now. So basically, you've got a thing where some of this free speech, that's the point of it. I'm going on there calling so-and-so an ugly ape or something, knowing that it's racist, right? Okay. I get kicked off Twitter. I tell everybody I've been kicked off Twitter. Keep the details a little bit, or basically so it doesn't matter, does it? It's free speech. Okay. And the point is that what you're going to do is you're going to take some people with you. They're going to go like, yeah, no, you're right. I don't like what you said, right? Okay. But the principle of being kicked off, I'm going to support that. And what you should be saying is, well, what did you say? Why did you say that? Okay. And so you need to look at it individually. The thing that annoys me about it, particularly with Twitter, is that they frame it as a moral argument. It's not a moral argument. Twitter frame it as a moral argument. It's a capitalistic money-making argument. That's what annoys me about it, is that basically they don't want to kick people off Twitter. They want Donald Trump. They want David Icke. They want people on Twitter drawing in advertising money, revenue, clicks and clicks and clicks. They only kick somebody off when the public relations becomes toxic. So they kicked Donald Trump off when they realized that it would turn off more customers than it turned on. Not because of what he said.
Yeah, he said more egregious stuff before than he did on the day of the Capitol. On the day of the Capitol, he was pretty calm by his usual standards.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was quite like, he played it down in ways that, if that had been 2016 Trump, he'd have been like, storm it.
Yeah, totally. This is the point. So and the problem is that you've got there's so many layers to this and stuff like that. And stuff like, I mean, Cambridge Analytica is still, I mean, I know they've split up, they're not a band. Like they dissolved after having two cover-ups by the British government. One where Robbie Gibb basically stopped the Panorama programme from coming out that would have exposed Aaron Banks's connection to Cambridge Analytica. He was later given a job in Theresa May's government.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah, it was lucky, really, wasn't it? Like, he just happened to fall into it. And then the second time was when the offices of Cambridge Analytica were being raided. And accidentally, they only put the wrong bloody date on the warrant, didn't they? Poor sods. And so Cambridge Analytica had a week notice in which time they cleared out the offices, basically, and got rid of all the hard drives and stuff like that. Like, Cambridge Analytica is floating around at the minute. You heard of PCR Claims, Michael Yeadon? Patrick Fagan from Cambridge Analytica on the set that up.
I knew I recognized that name somewhere. I absolutely knew it.
And he set up Michael Yeadon's Facebook news channel along with an ex-Conservative MP and an ex-UKIP MP. So it's the same group of people again. So weirdly, at the minute, the Nudge Unit and people connected to Cambridge Analytica are behind a lot of the anti-lockdown, anti-COVID stuff. Like for example, the concept that the lockdowns kill more people than they save was promoted by Economic Insight, which is the PR firm connected to the HM Treasury. Why would they want people? Why would they be anti-lockdown, the HM Treasury? Because they want us to keep on the FTSE 100. Okay, all the other scientists like Carl Hennigan, Sunita Gupta, Carol Sikora, Michael Yeadon, as I said, and all of these people, basically, they're all basically financed by the Tory donors, by people like the George and Emily Von Opel Foundation, because essentially they wanted to promote herd immunity, this concept of herd immunity, and that the tests don't work, and that basically they're inflating the figures, and the hospitals were full. All of that came from the Nudge Unit, promoted by those scientists, specifically through the PR firm Sergru Communications. So bizarrely, Cambridge Analytica has been behind what the majority of what would be considered conspiratorial alt media has actually been spreading for the last year. The idea that basically COVID doesn't exist, that Carrie Mullis said that the tests don't work, all of that came directly from the government. Why? For two reasons. One, because their donors asked them to. They physically asked them to and financed it. Who are their donors? It's the petrochemical companies connected to the airlines. That's why the airports have never, ever been shut. We're not allowed to go anywhere, but the airline, we're having people coming in all the time. And the second reason was because it's quite clever. Again, basically makes you feel like you're anti-establishment. You're fighting against the government who are keeping us in this lockdown and tricking us and stuff like that. When you actually look at it, the whole purpose of all of that is so that you doubt that many people died. Who benefits if you don't believe that 120,000 people died? Well, it's the government, isn't it? So that's why Cambridge Analytica and the Nudge Unit and HM Treasury and people connected to, for example, mapping of Turning Point UK, all those Trafalgar Square marches, they were put on by the Church of Scientology and by Turning Point UK.
Scientology?
Yes. Well, Greg Mappin, who is also the head of Camelot TV and Turning Point UK, he's a massive Scientologist.
Did not know that.
Or the person who financed it through Stand Up X is a Scientologist connected to a group called Exotech that has two other Scientologists, one of them named Lord McNair, who's most likely a spy for MI6.
Now, on on the other side of this, I do want to say that there then is like a lot of weird and odd connections in funding from the really, really hardcore pro-lockdown, pro-vaccine side, coming from people who own a lot of stock in vaccine companies.
Oh yeah, Gavi and all that.
Yeah,
cool.
But my point is essentially that I'm trying to not get caught up in the one side is really corrupt, because it feels like both sides are being pushed from the extremes of both, the extremes of both sides are being pushed.
Well, political divides don't really matter. I mean, like, for example, the Heritage Foundation has dictated policy for the Clintons, the Obama administration, and I have no doubt that they're in with Biden.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, totally. This is the point. Politics is a game, essentially. It's teams and it's flavors, if you like, right? Okay. And this is the point. So with Brexit and blah blah and Cambridge Analytica, Trump, Reagan, Thatcher, that was right wing. We've got a bit of a right wing feel going on with it. It's the right wing flavour. And then basically, when people get sick of that, or they'll bring in Obama or Biden, which is a left wing flavour. People will have noticed that Biden is absolutely rubbish. He's not reversed anything that Trump's done. He's not going to, right?
Except some of the things that, like, the tiny things that I think Trump did correct, like allowing Chinese manufacturers to be involved in like the electrical grid of America. That seems like a reasonable thing. So he's taken that away, but like left all like loads of the most ridiculous things in place. So yeah, you're 100% right.
Yeah, they're crap. They're absolutely crap on both sides. None of them are to be trusted. It's a boys' club once you get to the sort of very, very top level. And I say, like, this is the problem: is that politics is just a flavour, right? Okay, the people who manufacture the ice cream, it's the same each time. And it's basically, again, it's the petrochemical industries, it's the banking investment sector. It's either people who are going to be connected with the Council for Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, or the Heritage Foundation and the Council for National Policy. That's it, really, because essentially that's it. That's where all the money goes. And it doesn't really matter, as I say, like, you know, they're like, you've got left-wing, say, celebrities, you've got right-wing celebrities. They all went to Oxford. They all went to Cambridge, like all of them. Like a few of them might have gone to Manchester and stuff like that, like you Rick Mouse and your Ed Edmondsons and stuff like that. But like, yeah, it's like George Carlin said, it's a big club and you're not in it, right? But this is the new mind control, so to speak. It's narrative control. It's mimetic warfare, in as much as it's basically sound bites and basically people bolstering concepts. What they do very, very cleverly is, because social media is a horrible, horrendous thing, right? Okay, it works like gambling. It literally produces a dopamine response, and it crushes your self-esteem, because essentially you've got an audience, and you have to. Sometimes you'll cater your output because people shout at you and stuff like that. And like, you're isolated and yet overstimulated, which just happens to be the very first line of the QBARC mind control document. It's like a torture document that tells you how to turn people into vegetables. Isolation and overstimulation. Seriously. Yeah, sure, of course. And Peter Thiel, obviously, who was helping start Facebook, was connected through In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA's venture capital arm. And then you've got people like Sean Parker as well, who was also involved, and he works as a hacker for the CIA. The problem is, as I say, like, social media, it makes you less social. And with Cambridge Analytica, what they're doing is they're feeding you these stories, right? They're feeding you these opinions and these narratives, and you're using that to bolster and to put it onto you, to give you to these like talismans of the sort of person that you are. Because with social media, right, everyone's become convinced, and this was the point of it, everyone's been convinced that they're you're the lead character in a film, right? Okay, it's you're a roving reporter. It's your job to tell your followers and your fans, this is your mission, right? To disseminate information and to help people. And you know what's, it's not a criticism, because that's an incredibly noble thing. Just like QAnon. You're fighting against the forces of darkness, but they've manipulated you into this position. And here's a really, really cruel thing. You haven't got enough information to tell people. So you need to get that, because let's take it to an extreme level. You've got a radio show, you want clicks and stuff like that. So you need to have these stories. Where do you get these stories from? Well, you get these stories from the same echo chamber. And then what's compounded is, the crap that I was getting for telling people about Brexit, for sticking my head above the parapet and telling people, actually, I don't think it's a good idea to leave the EU. I think we've been lied to. People don't like that. Same thing with like this, the COVID stuff, and anything, in fact, where you're going against the crowd. People are like, whoa, stop rocking the boat, would you please? And a lot of the time, again, they don't want the truth. They want to be told that they're right and to have psychological comfort. Because if you're right, it's one less thing that you've got to worry about. Do you know what I mean? You've got, it's all right. It's all sorted. I know how the world is. I can react. I'm safe. And that's the really sort of the cruel mechanism of Cambridge Analytica and similar types of manipulation, is that they play on the best of you and the worst of you, and they will hang you out to dry, and they will leave you completely sort of like just stripped away, and they don't care, because they've used you spent, and they're off, and they're doing something else. Basically, once basically they've used this Brexit crowd, I mean, for example, they got the vote. Once essentially like the NHS's is privatized or they achieve whatever they want to achieve. Just like with Trump, like basically once they got Trump in, all those like promises and stuff, like that, the ways that it was going to make your life better, none of them materialized, did they? Because they don't care. Because they just don't care. They used you to get what they want. They tricked you into voting a particular way. And that is the most cruel aspect of these things, is that basically it's playing on systems like social media that are become so ubiquitous that to some people it's their only source of interaction. And it's poison.
Especially the last year. I think that's why things have got so crazy. And people seem to have got so crazy.
Yeah, because it's their only outlet, isn't it, really? And people want reassurance and people want to be secure. And the worst thing to deal with is uncertainty, not quite knowing. And not knowing about something that could affect you in a really negative way, like, waiting for the results of a medical test or something like that. That's essentially what's been happening recently, isn't it? Like, regardless of whether you believe like severity of code or stuff like that, let's not get into that. But you might know someone that dies. You might miss an operation. Your business might close. You might not see your friends for ages. You'd be lonely, stuff like that. There's a whole plethora of problems that are playing on people's minds that are not being addressed or helped by the government.
No.
And in times of crisis like that, people want reassurance and people just want to be told, what is what and what's up and what is down, so that they can get on with it. And again, this is where grifters and stuff come in, because people who tell you exactly what you want to hear, and then just Patreon, it's just down there, just the little, the link there, just if you want to donate. And that's, again, it is cruel, but it's another way that people can be manipulated. This is, again, going back to your earlier question about how susceptible people are, the cruel aspect of it is the nicer and more trusting a person you are, the more easily you're manipulated. Because that sounds a bit silly, but think about it. If you've never been in like a scenario, if you basically live in your home life, people were honest to you and you weren't tricked and you weren't manipulated at school and people didn't lie to you and steal from you, you're not going to be used to it. So you're not going to notice the tricks. Like the first time that bloke in town comes up to you and goes with a petrol can, goes, mate, you couldn't lend me a £5 and my car's broken down and blah, 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 blah. You go, oh, maybe his car has broken down. It's only a £5. Well, whatever you go, here you go, mate, blah, blah, blah. The third time he comes up to you, you just go, mate, if you want some smack, just say you want some smack. Like, I'll buy it for you. So, but do you know what I mean? It's the familiarity. And again, this is why I would denote Cambridge Analytica as a mind control program, because it alters the way you think and then alters the way that you act by playing on those well-worn mechanisms, essentially.
How much do you think that this, say, young millennials, Gen Zers and beyond are perhaps more impervious to this than previous generations? Do you think that's a thing? Because I don't know. I've tried to figure out that. I don't know. For example, if my mom gets like emails in her inbox, she has to open them and check who they're from and whatnot. And I just ignore like 90% of my emails because I know it's spam, rubbish, or phishing links or something like that. It doesn't even register. And it's the same with adverts on social media. For me, I don't even notice that they're there most of the time. And
well, I'll give you an example, and this might just be me being a miserable old sod, but my mate's kid, when I'm asking him what music he's into and blah, 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 and he's telling me all these supposedly underground artists that, listen to so-and-so, listen to so-and-so, listen to so-and-so. It's like, where did you hear them? He goes, on Spotify.
Right.
And it's like, there's two channels for music now, apparently, like Spotify and iTunes. So now here's the thing, like, again, this might be me just being a miserable sod, but the point of selling music like that, like say a Ghost Main or a Little Pump or something like that, is that you found him. You found him. He's doing it himself. He's underground, and it's special because you found him, right? Okay. How do you think he got on that Spotify playlist? There's a new thing. Whereas basically A&Rs in music would go out and like hype up bands and get them on, tours and television shows and stuff like that. The new hype, which has actually started with people like Arctic Monkeys, Justin Bieber, that type of thing, is to get it around the internet. So your A&R job is to get influence. Do you know what I mean? So for example, like an artist like, say, Little Pump became very, very big out of nowhere because of his wacky videos and stuff like he did. The only reason you got those wacky videos is because somebody made sure you had those wacky videos. So it always changes. There'll be some things that kids are completely sort of like, they get, like, do you know what I mean? Like, oh, come on, I see what you're trying to sell me and stuff like that. And then there's these other things that people aren't savvy to. And everybody's susceptible to it. Like, literally everybody's susceptible to it. Like, because you can't be on your guard all the time because, you'd be a robot.
It's exhausting. It's really exhausting sometimes.
Yeah, totally. And again, the horrible thing about it is that, the best way to get somebody's money, you tell them what they want to hear. You figure out, and this was why Cambridge Analytica was successful, right? Okay. Just to sort of clarify what they did, they looked at your data, your emails, the way that the things that you liked and disliked, and they figured out what made you tick. They got data points about you and what makes you angry, what makes you sad, what makes you happy. And then they personally catered adverts and news stories that they knew would push your buttons and sent them to you, alongside creating sock puppet accounts so that you were bought into this sort of cult-like mentality and stuff like that. So the point is that basically they feed you the information which they know will appeal to you because of what they've been studying about you, and then they encourage you to disseminate and to spread and to become an evangelist for that information. And 9 times out of 10 that information is not true. So this is the problem that you're going to get into, is that basically by the time you're arguing about bendy bananas, right? Do you know, or something ridiculous like that? So you can't even begin to. You've got to get through so much detritus before why are you voting for it? Well, because of this, and this. None of those things are true, but we're going to have to go through each one of them and show you how they're not true. And the problem is, again, people just shut down. People don't want to be told that basically they've been tricked. Or lied to. So here's the very annoying thing, is that people will double down and they'll do all sorts of mental gymnastics to prove that they weren't wrong in the first place, rather than just basically go, oh, well, that's new information. Fair enough. Thank you. But again, it's not a criticism.
Oh my God. Can you imagine Twitter if that's what happened?
Yeah. Right. This is the point. But again, like, Twitter's an interesting one, and social media, nobody acts in real life like they do on Twitter, because basically you're not interacting with that person. Like, in a very, very simple way, you don't say certain things to a person in a pub that you'd say on Twitter, because that person will stick a glass in your face. Like this is the disconnect.
Who was it? Someone said that social media has taught a whole generation of people how to talk without getting taught a lesson. And that sounds sinister, but it's kind of true. Like people wouldn't react in the same way. Yeah.
Well, there's no consequence in a number of ways. The one consequence is the sort of like the detrimental to you sort of consequence, like, oh, that person's put my nose out across my face because I called him whatever. The other one is you don't see the effect that you're having on people. And most people who aren't psychopaths, when they realise they've upset someone, they'll empathise. And because you've got that separation, you've got the detachment, you've got an audience baying for you to pwn this fool and stuff like that, you don't get that. You just don't, you're missing out on the body language. And body language is what, 85% of communication? Like, the amount of conversations that I've had on social media where the sarcastic inflection or whatever has been totally missed. And all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, hang on, we're arguing now. It's like, do you know what I mean? Or it becomes very confused because, I mean, my grammar's rubbish. Like, so like,
oh, you're screwed on the internet, man. Like,
exactly.
they just, the grammar Nazis will jump down your throat.
Absolutely.
It's just like, it's that meme. I can't, it's like, when someone's ruining you in an argument and they make a grammatical error and you're like, ooh, like, I've won. It's so real.
There's two other things that people do. The one thing is when they realize that they're wrong, is they'll start to shift the argument slightly and say, but you can't mean that blah, blah, blah. I said, no, we're not talking about that. I see what you did. Stop trying to shift the argument to something like different. And then the final thing that they'll do is they'll insult you, okay? And then when you insult them back, they'll go, now you're resorting to insults. Therefore, I have the moral victory, and they'll block you. And it's like, and again, we're watching that Bastard Squad, we call it, the police interceptors thing that we watch like every week because it's filmed where I live. And I've seen loads of people that I went to school with getting arrested.
Oh, really?
Yes,
that's got to be great.
And every time they get nicked or whatever, they'll have to have a little moral victory, like, oh, you couldn't get over that. We were watching it last night. This bloke was arrested. It's like, you couldn't get over that fence, though. You couldn't get over that fence, though, to the police officer. And it's like, that's really not important. But he's got to take it down to have that tiny victory. Do you see what I mean? And that's in his mind. He's like, you couldn't get over the fence, idiot. It's like, you go in prison, mate. Yeah, but you couldn't get over the fence.
Yeah, like handcuffed behind his back, being like, I won.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, precisely. And that's the thing. That's again, horribly, the kind of mentality that social media breeds. Because, again, you don't necessarily want to have a conversation. You want to win. Or, do you know what I mean? You just want to get your dopamine rush, or you thrill by going, poof, bazing, that's clever of me, and then get on with my day. And I'm sure we've all had that, where basically you come back, it's like, they've replied, oh, God, bloody hell, now I've got to have a conversation, like would you just realise that I've won? Like, which is the silliness, obviously. But yeah, I can't help but think that it's designed for that, social media. I think it's a monitoring thing, and it's a way. It's like a test. It's like almost like a sort of big electronic petri dish. It's like, let's push people's buttons. And again, this is why I noticed Cambridge Analytica when it first came out, or when I first became aware of it. I was like, oh, it's a mind control program. And the reason I was like as a mind control program is because it's so similar to Earnest Voice and Sentient World Simulation and ESCMISC and JTRIG and numerous other online manipulation programs, which basically you've got people like GCHQ and the Pentagon and Department of Defense in America running simulation war games where they're basically trying to manipulate people against their will and without their knowledge. And 9 times out of 10, it's about taking over conversations online, manipulating people's emotions to get them angry or sad, and or introducing the concept of like a guru, like a leader that will take people in a particular way and away from more sort of like more damaging material to the government, say, and they'll give them lots of red herrings that will keep them occupied, and they won't be sort of like bothering them basically, and that's what Cambridge Analytica did. So when I became aware of it, it's like, it's the same thing. It's literally the same thing. And then when you find out the sort of the connections that it has to the British government and the military, and the espionage agencies and stuff like that, and how it's used abroad. As well as domestically, like you go, well, yeah, it is. It's a manipulation program. Like it is literally a mind control program. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's one of those things where, on the face of it, it doesn't seem terribly sophisticated, because it's like, it's good common marketing, advertising, really, isn't it? That's all it is. It's trying to persuade people with advertising, but it's honed down to such a very clever degree that it's incredibly, incredibly successful, basically.
I mean, great marketing doesn't have to be complicated.
No.
Make America great again. Get Brexit done.
Yeah.
take back control.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
all these phrases were clearly thought out. I mean, I think take back control
build the wall.
Brilliant. I think it was truly the work of a genius. If it was intended in all of the ways that it can be interpreted, I think it was brilliant. But like the last thing I want to ask you is obviously we've talked here about a lot of things that are pretty, I don't want to say depressing, but real. Okay. But the question I have for you to finish up is like, how much do you think that maybe when I say social media, I don't necessarily mean Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. I mean like the potential concept of that interconnected world that can be built, like the best possible version of Reddit or some of these new platforms that are more like blockchain based and a lot less based in like it's more about just like people having a little community to talk to rather than like a grandstand upon which to preach to the world. And how positive are you about the potential of that side of social media and this kind of technology to help us get beyond this? Or do you think we're just truly screwed?
It's difficult to say, isn't it? Because it's like anything. It's a tool, and you know, for all the sort of negative aspects of social media and stuff like that, it's helped some people in immeasurable ways. You know, people who literally have no output or outlet to chat with people. It's provided for that. It depends on human nature. This is the problem, isn't it? Basically, like it's a tool. Like a hammer's a tool. You can build something fabulous with a hammer. You can destroy, like, you know, things just as easily with a hammer. Like, so the thing is as well, it's a new technology. I think as people get more savvy to it and more sort of aware of the nefarious aspects of it. This is the strange thing, right? Okay. Television, film, marketing, stuff like that. People will they know the tricks and stuff like that. Not all of them. But for example, when Wayne Rooney says, buy this aftershave, people are like, you think I'm an idiot? You think I'm going to buy it just because Wayne Rooney, like, you know what I mean? It doesn't always work, but you can see the technique, right? Same thing with, say, political things. He's not answered the question. Like, we're getting wise with it. We're not very wise with the internet. For some reason, people think that the internet is international waters. And it's really annoying because basically you're in the one place where you can check everything and people check nothing. And that's because of the speed of it and the concept of social media and the concept that you've got an audience and stuff like that. So as people get better at it, I think it might get better. Like it's about being able to decipher information and to be able to sort of look through it. And I think what a lot of people would benefit from is learning how to write an essay, in as much as you basically make an argument for and an argument against, and you weigh it up to see which is more plausible. Because a lot of the people basically, again, because you're programmed to do that, somebody in a white coat says X, you go, well, he sounds like he knows what he's doing. Look at all those letters behind his name, whatever. They appeal to authority, and then they'll disseminate it themselves. You know, they'll spread it on, and that can work on both sides of the debate. So,
Anthony Fauci to Michael Yeadon, the whole spectrum.
Yeah, quite exactly. This is the point. Both of those people are using that authority to appeal to people, and it's like a magic trick, right? Well, it's like a film. I studied film for an MA. So there's certain things where you can see plot structures being set up because it's a trope, say, or whatever. And like people, when with Penn and Teller went to watch like the local bloke doing rabbit in the hat tricks, I don't think they'd be that impressed because they know how it works. And so it's the same sort of thing. Basically, once you get to notice the patterns, you can start to sort of you can start to sort of unpick it. But the trick is to not go too far the other way. For example, at the minute, like within the alternative media, a lot of people would say, oh, if it's on the BBC, I know that the opposite is true. And it's like, it's not as simple as that. Like if it was, life would be far more straightforward and stuff like that. It's not quite as straightforward as that. And so people really need to start basically looking at information and thinking about who's giving you this information, why, what could they possibly gain from it? Okay. And then the other thing that people need to do is they need to be able to admit when they're wrong. And it's fine. It's fine to be wrong. In fact, being wrong is good because that's how you learn. Right. And people need to change their perspectives with no shame once they receive new information, because you'd be astonished how many premises are basically again, we're at C and A is not true, but we've never bothered to, do you know what I mean? Because we're already at C. So we're already arguing that this is this and this and blah, 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 because it's Napoleonic law or whatever. And so you've got to go back to A and you've got to sort of determine whether it's true and whether that somebody might be lying to you to try and manipulate you, basically. So again, and the problem is, Josh, that basically by the time that we've figured all this out, there'll be a new medium that has come along that we don't know how to sort of manipulate. So yeah, I don't know whether it'll all work out well or not. Let's hope.
I hope so too. I mean, I love the irony of scrolling past some. Actually, I'm not even scrolling on my phone anymore because I'll put my my imaginary phone down. I scroll on my laptop because I got rid of it all on my phone because it was irritating.
Oh, right.
And because I read way too much about how it was like the apps especially are just the most on steroids, like addictive behavioral, pieces of tech.
It's a game. That's what most people don't realize. Twitter and Facebook is a game. What's the point of the game? To stay in the game. That's literally the point. I'm not even joking. That is the way it is designed. It's a dopamine response. Go there to get your gossip and to get your thrills and to maybe have a bit of an argument, punch up, debate, break some bloke's nose, that sort of thing. That's the point. But it's a game. It's designed as a game, like a one-armed bandit. It's just perpetual. The point is to keep you in the game for as long as possible. And whilst you're in the game, they're mining your data, they're selling you advertising, there's lots of things
learning
going on.
All our behavior, scanning all our pictures, learning how to be more human for the bots, and what, all of these horrible, awful things. But Neil, I want to thank you. I could probably talk about this all night, but I have unfortunately got to run. So. Yeah, people buy Neil's book. I'm not going to say follow me on Twitter after the conversation we just had. But yeah, man, thanks very much. It was a pleasure.
Oh, no, the pleasure's all mine. Delightful. Come back anytime, mate. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.